Oh, they set it up. Good. This is tape. Don't know why this is here.
What? No.
Birthday, anniversary, all the things. Okay.
Yeah. I've tried a couple of them. By the time I get to the Citizenship process, come up with something clever to say. We tried an AI program where like I would put in the short description of an episode and like write the interesting post into it. I was like, All right, you ready? You guys all
Seems so far away.
Yeah, that's somebody else. Good, good.
I'll bring you back one. If I can. I know you do.
Oh, yeah, look at yeah.
Okay. All right, well, good morning.
Good morning.
I hope everybody's doing well. I am attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons. Come on, Chris. I'm attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons, and I am a Black Creek Indian. My family came here to Oklahoma in the 1830s on what's known as the Trail of Tears. My ancestor, one of my ancestors, Cowito Miko, my four-time great-grandfather, one of the 5 individuals who negotiated and signed the Creek Treaty of 1866, which says specifically in Article 2, and there's a copy of it right here to my left, that Creeks of African descent are guaranteed full citizenship within the Creek Nation and all the rights and benefits thereof. That is what this case is about. That is what this issue is about. For 43 years, the Creek Nation, based upon anti-Black discrimination, has oppressed, humiliated, and degraded Black Creek Indians, so-called Creek Freedmen, and stripped and stole our heritage and our citizenship and those benefits. People like my dear grandmother, Johnny Mae Simmons, who passed away 3 years ago in December at 87 years old, who grew up speaking Creek, living on our Creek allotment. In 1979, she was stripped and stolen of our heritage. That's what this case is about. That's what this fight is about. I've been on this fight since law school, since 2001. I've been dealing with the legalities of this issue. The very first case that I tried in my career after law school in 2005 was on this very issue at the Creek Nation court system. We actually won that case at the tribal court, and 2 years later, the Creek Supreme Court overturned that decision. And ever since that day, that's 15 years ago, we've been fighting to get right back to this point, to have the opportunity to go back in front of the Creek courts and show them what the plain language of the law states. It's in black and white for everyone to see. There's a famous quote that says, "Great nations, like great men, keep their word." The Creek Nation gave their word on June 14, 1866. We want them to keep their word. We want them to follow through on their sovereignty when they stated that Creeks of African descent would be citizens of the Creek Nation. Also, people need to understand that the Black Creeks were the co-founders of Greenwood and its Black Wall Street. Let me be clearer than that. If it were not for Black Creeks, there is no Black Wall Street. There is no Greenwood without the Black Creek Indians that were already here and this creek land that part of Greenwood sits on. It's very important to have justice for Greenwood. We must have justice for Black Creek. Before I talk a little bit more about the case and more of the legalities, and I have my co-counsel, David Riggs, who's going to say some words, I want you to first hear from the two named plaintiffs in this case, Rhonda Grayson and Jeff Kennedy. Both Black Creeks, both have been fighting for their rights for themselves and their families in our community for over 25 years. Working full-time jobs, raising families, doing everything else that we do as individuals, but in every free moment, fighting for their grandparents, their parents, and their children, coming out of their own pockets, defying the odds, all the odds, obstacles, and opposition that they have endured. The hundreds of letters that you've received from Creeks trying to be enrolled, and they get that little form letter that says, "You're nothing but a formerly enslaved African. You're not allowed. We don't want you." These are the people that have been taking those calls and making that fight. So I want you to hear from Rhonda to tell us a little bit about the organization of Muscogee Creek Indian Freedmen Band, about her family history, to hear from Jeff, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the case. Rhonda Grayson.
Thank you so much. I am Rhonda Grayson. I am what one would call a descendant of Creek Freedmen. My ancestor, Tony Hawkins, was born around 1790 in the old Creek country. And so oftentimes we hear the stories about individuals traveling the Trail of Tears, but we never hear the story about those individuals of African descent. Well, guess what? Our families traveled the Trail of Tears. They suffered the uprooting of their homes, the rigors of travels, and they were indeed aboard the Monmouth, on board that ship that sunk on the Mississippi River, headed to Indian Territory. Many African people of African descent suffered the same losses as anyone else that was considered to be a full-blood Indian or a half-blood Indian. Our people have been there, we've been there all the while. Our people managed to make it to the new land, Indian Territory. After the Civil War, of course they fought in the Civil War. The Union won. They were freed by Treaty of 1866. Many people don't know that. Whereas you have the people who were considered state blacks, they were freed, but we did not become freed from slavery or emancipated until 1866, and that was by Treaty of 1866. That is what we're fighting for. We are citizens of the nation. We were removed from that nation. Our family members fought. They fought for us to be able to stand here today, for us to be able to attend college and become attorneys, to work in corporate America, be architects and different things like that. So we have a responsibility to fight as long as we can, and no matter how much it costs. And that's why we fight. Many people ask me, why for so many years, why do you fight? Why does Jeff fight? Why does Sharon Lindsay Scott fight? We fight because we have a responsibility to fight. We fight because our ancestors fought. They fought when they didn't have anything. And so we can wake up every morning and put on our clothes, our nice shoes, head to corporate America. But guess what? They were on those trailer cheers, carrying the luggage for someone else, paving the way. So you ask the question, why we fight? That's why we fight. These people, they served in the House of Kings and in the House of Warriors as senators, judges, lawyers. They served the nation and they served it well. And then in 1979, the Creek Nation decided to divest themselves of the people known as Creek Freedmen. I am a proud Black Creek woman. Proud. And I'm proud. And we are fighting for justice. That's why we are here today. We're fighting for justice. And we pray that Judge Mauser on December 1st make the right decision, the only decision that she can make based on that treaty of 1866 is to affirm the citizen rights of those people known as Creek Freedmen. I am a descendant of those people, and we are entitled, not deserving, but we are entitled to be members of that tribe. And the truth be told, we are still citizens because that treaty is still valid. They are breaking their own law. They're in violation of the law. And so we just thank you guys for coming out. And I think I spoke too much. I'll let Jim Kennedy talk a little bit.
No, because I'm not gonna do as well as but I just want to say, Songe, that's all is well. Anybody? That's all right. My name is Jim Kennedy. I am a descendant of Ben Grayson, number 5329. Most of you out there that do have an ancestor, this is how we talk. We talk about the number, the low number given to our ancestors, so we could have a distinction. His great-grandfather was Chitichaki. He was known as a half-breed, half Indian, half colored. But it says in my documents that he married a Black woman. So for the most part, we're some of the most documented people in the nation. And I say that because it's a shock to be able to record, for them to actually to have recorded all that information. So we don't get this stuff by oral history. We get this stuff or our information by document. Anyway, we fight because really we can. That's what we do, always have and always will. But what I wanted to do is just kind of touch base on the Muscogee Creek Indian Freedmen Band. And our mission statement is to preserve and protect the unique historic and heritage and genealogy of the Muscogee Creek Indian Freedmen who were removed to Indian Territory, Oklahoma, on the Trail of Tears, to promote interest and participation by sharing genealogical information with members, researching, and the general public, to provide help as educational resource to researchers through lectures, workshops, conferences, and museum exhibits, to educate members and the public of the African Creek's political rights as citizens of the Creek Nation defined by the Creek Treaty of 1866. We still want to just make sure everybody knows that the Treaty of 1866 is the supreme law of the land, so we should prevail.
Before I ask another one of our Black Creek sisters, Christy Williams, to say a few words, I want to acknowledge the coalition that we built for this time with the Justice for Greenwood organization, obviously, the Terrence Crutcher Foundation, and also the Muscogee Creek Indian Freedmen Band. We also have some great media partners like the Black Wall Street Times, and we have Roland Martin on Gilbert coming all the way down here from Washington, D.C. to cover this press conference, cover our rally tonight. Roland's going to speak for us and cover tomorrow's hearing. We are so excited. We have so many people from around this nation that are standing with us about this issue. Now I want you to hear from my good friend, Christy Williams. She's small, but she packs a mighty punch.
Thank you. First, I want to start by saying thank you to Attorney Damario, Solomon-Simmons, and to Rhonda Grayson, because they're carrying the torch, and those also who came before us, Eli Grayson. Oh, I'm sorry. But again, I'm gonna start over because I really want to just make sure I thank you because I know this work is hard. And not only are you fighting for Black Creek, you're fighting for the survivors, and you're fighting for injustice for Black people. You've been doing this, like you said, since law school. And I know you get tired, but you say the course, and I love you. I appreciate you. And Rhonda Grayson, thank you for also carrying the torch all the way from Oklahoma City, and we hear you across this country. And I know you get tired, but you still do it. And Eli Grayson, thank you. Marilyn Van, Ron Graham, and so many others who been fighting this fight for so long. But again, my name is Christy Williams. I am a Creek Freedmen descendant. My 3 times great-grandfather, Jesse Franklin, who was a Supreme Court justice for the Creek Nation, and his DAWS number is 1567. This morning when I was getting ready, I couldn't help but to notice that the White House is having its tribal summit right in this moment. And the Creek Nation has a seat at the table. They are sitting at the table at the White House right now. And it's so crazy because these are the same Creek Nation that violated the Creek Treaty, the Treaty of 1866, Article 2. And this is the same tribe that stood with the Confederacy to protect its sovereign rights, to enslave Black people, my ancestors. And they are sitting at the table at the White House right now. Sorry, I got my cards, I got my notes. And now I know the Creek Nation will probably say, well, why are y'all blaming us? Y'all should also blame the government. And they're right, because they had a co-signer. The United States government also co-signed that treaty. And our beloved President Joe Biden, he can end this right now. He can end it. But we have to also keep pushing it to challenge them to do that. So the Creek Nation is not only accountable, this government is accountable. Right now in Georgia, our federal government has sent mass support for voting rights through Georgia, and rightfully so. But what about us Black Creeks right here in Indian Territory? What about us here? And our president, he came here during the centennial and stood right here in this other room. And I just want to read you just a paragraph of what he said when he stood in this room. He said, for much too long, the history of what took place here was told in silence, cloaked in darkness. But just because history is silent, it doesn't mean that it didn't take place. And while darkness can hide much, it erases nothing. Some injustices are so heinous, so horrific, that can't be buried no matter how hard people try. So it's here. Only with truth can healing and justice, can come healing, justice, and repair. Those were the words of our President Joe Biden when he stood just in that other room. But I'm here to tell you today, in Oklahoma, we have a problem because we're hiding so much. We're hiding the justice that belongs to our 3 survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. We're hiding women and children in the mass graves that they were buried. And this truth about us being slaves to the 5 tribes and the Creek Nation, we're hiding this history and it needs to be told. But I'm here to tell you today, as a Creek Freedman, I have a right to the share of the land. We have a right to the share of the land. We have a right to the share of the funds. But today we do not. And no longer are we going to continue to carry the badges of slavery, because that is exactly what they're forcing us to do. And we have had enough of it. And so I know that my friend, my brother, Attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons is going to end this, and he's going to keep fighting until it does, and we're all going to support him in doing so. Thank you.
Wow. The badges of slavery. I want to talk a little bit about the badges of slavery, which, when you put everybody on the Creek Freedmen road, they froze us in history. In 1866, we weren't called Creek Freedmen. There were Creeks of African descent, but it included Creeks who were already here when Columbus got here. It included quote-unquote mixed bloods. It included Africans who had been enslaved. But then they just lumped us all into this one category, Creek Freedmen, in 1906. And who did that? The Creek Nation didn't do that. The United States government did that, utilizing what's called the hypo descent rule, that when you showed up to be enrolled, if you looked black, but they thought you were black, they put you on the Creek Freedmen rule. And that was all about land, because the lesser your so-called blood quantum, the easier it was to get your land. I don't get too far into that, but you're right, Chris. A badge of slavery. And she also talked about we have a right to the benefits of citizenship, which includes healthcare, educational benefits, housing. Did you know that the Creek Nation received a couple $2 billion or so during the COVID pandemic? And they gave each Creek citizen $4,500, Phil. $4,500 to each Creek citizen. Yet the Black Creeks or Creek Freedmen did not receive a cent. In fact, go back to 2016, when the federal government gave about $32 million to the Creek Nation for a settlement of lands that was stolen back in the 1800s. That money went into the Creek Nation, and every Creek should have been able to participate in those dollars. But Creek Freedmen, that money was stolen from us. And each and every year, that our tax dollars go into the Creek Nation through federal funding and then is denied to us as Creek Freedmen. That is theft. That is a badge of slavery. That destroys Black communities across this city, state, and nation. Those resources and benefits would improve Black life substantially. And you cannot put a price tag on taking someone's heritage and who they are and their history and erasing it. You go down to Creek Nation right now, you will not see anything about Black Creeks. You will not see Cal Minko, who signed that treaty, who saved thousands of lives of Creek Indians during the Civil War, who were starving to death at Fort Gibson. No mention of it. No mention of the Black Creeks, who, if we tell the truth, the Creek Nation wouldn't be here if it was not for the contributions of the Black Creeks. My whole family on my father's side, from Johnny Mae Simmons, my grandmother was a Creek. For John Simmons, her father was a Creek miner on the Creek Road, born in 1900. His father and mother, Jake Simmons Sr. and Rose Simmons. Her father, Amy Calton and John Jefferson. Their parents, Calton and Melinda Calton. We can keep going back to the 1700s. Born in Seminole Nation, Alabama. We know our history. We know who we are. We know what we're owed, and we're coming forward. So now, if our judge, and you never know what a judge is going to do, but the law is written. This is the legislation of law. The treaty is clear, plain language. There's no other decision but for the Creek Nation to exercise its sovereignty and say, we're going to do right by this treaty. We're not going to wait for the federal government to make the decision, even though the federal government has already made that decision in the Cherokee Nation and Seminole Nation. We don't need to wait for the federal government. We're not going to continue to allow our hypocrisy as a Creek Nation, allow this to be used against us by Kevin Stitt and others here in Oklahoma that want to erode tribal sovereignty because of the hypocrisy of the Creek Nation. We're going to take a stand. We're going to honor our word. We're going to bring in our own family members, and we're going to become one nation and be stronger than ever moving forward. That's what's going to happen tomorrow. I believe that, because that's what should happen based upon the law. And speaking of law, I definitely want to give a few moments for one of my legal mentors, one of my best friends, I'll just say it, David Riggs of Riggs Abbey Law Firm. He's been practicing law for long enough I've been alive. Great lawyer, justice fighter. And I try to pull him in on everything I can, and most of the time he said, come on, let's do it. And he's been on this case also with me and with Rhonda and Jeff. So David, if you please just come and say a few words.
Many of you you all have known Damario longer than I have, and many of you, or some of you have known about this particular injustice longer than I have. But I have known Damario long enough to see how dedicated he is to this cause. In fact, how dedicated he is to other causes like this. In fact, he virtually dedicated his entire law firm or law practice to taking on these kinds of issues. And believe me, they're not easy. They're hard, they take a long time, and they take complete dedication to the purpose you're fighting for. And because of that, we want to thank you for being here today and supporting what Damario and some of his friends and associates are trying to accomplish, because it is so hard. We might be getting close to the end now, but like some famous person said, it's not over till it's over. So keep talking about this and telling people about it and spreading the word, and hopefully it will be over soon. Thank you.
All righty, well, we thank you for coming out. I want to remind everyone that tonight at 6:30, right back here. Oh, Eli, did you want to say something? Come on.
A little harsher. I apologize for my shades. I have allergies this morning. My name is Eli Grayson. I'm a citizen of the Creek Nation. My ancestors are both by blood and freedmen, tribal roll members on the Dobbs Roads. I want to go back to the treaty. There are 5 promises in Article 2 of the 1866 treaty. There's only one of those things that the Creek Nation actually follows. The other 4, they are in violation of. And that one thing is that they cannot put shackles on Christie. They can't put shackles on Damario. They can't put shackles on Jeff. They can't put shackles on Wanda. But all the other things in Article 2, they actually ignore. The Article 2 says slavery will no longer exist in your tribe. So they're not doing that. Your enslaved people would now be your tribal citizens. They're ignoring that. You would have an equal interest in the soil and an equal interest in the national funds. They're ignoring that. And you're to be treated the same as the Indian class. They're ignoring that. So the only thing they haven't done is showed up at Christie's house saying, you're back in slavery now. That's the only thing they're not doing. You know, so you got to wonder if they can get away with not following these other 4 things. Could they some kind of way sue in the federal courts that we have a right to enslave Black people again? We have to think about that, because that's exactly, you know, it's so terrible. You know, go back to Joe Biden or any president since 1978, 79, who could have actually stepped in and did something about it. Bill Clinton did it for the Seminole Freedmen. Since then, each president has ignored the plight of the Choctaw Freedmen, the Creek Freedmen, really the Cherokee Freedmen until Obama became president. And it wasn't until his second term that the Justice Department got involved with the Cherokee Freedmen case. You know, but let's just be real. Tribes donate a lot of money to political campaigns. That's the game that they play in Washington, D.C. Currently, the White House Summit on Native American issues is going on this week. It started today. Creek Nation is sitting at the table in violation of their own treaty. Choctaw Nation is sitting at the table in violation of its own treaty. Think about it. And the president and the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, can actually do something about this. This shouldn't even have to go to court. They can say, no, you can't do this. Or we would shut you down. And they have the authority to do that. But they're not doing it. And that's the issue. There's 2 signers to the treaty. One is the federal government, the other is the tribe. Both have a responsibility to the only group of people that have protections in the treaty. The Indians are not mentioned for a protected class in the treaty. The only protected class in that treaty are the people who these tribes enslaved. You can get down into the other articles. There is no rights given to no one else. The only rights given to a class of people in the Creek Nation is found in Article 2. And yet, the federal government refuses to step in and do anything about this. And you got to wonder why. It's because of the campaign donations. Let's just be real. You know, this is not something where, you know, those of us that's been involved in this for years have gone back and looked at when we were fighting the Creek Freedmen case, how many contributions from the Cherokee Nation went to political campaigns during that time. But we still won it in federal court eventually. The same thing with what's going on with the Creek Nation. We just can't go after the Creek Nation. The federal government signed that treaty too. The federal government is the bigger partner in that treaty. Their guns are bigger. Their guns are bigger. And they have the authority to terminate an Indian tribe when they're not following. Here's the thing. When we think about the treaties, guess what? The Creek Nation cannot go back to Georgia or Alabama and say we want our land back. We have a right to be here. Because the removal treaty says you can't do that. So they don't go. They stay here. And in the Treaty of 1866, guess what happened where Oklahoma City is? That used to be Creek Nation territory. But the Creek Nation can't go over to Oklahoma City and open up a casino. Because the Treaty of 1866 clearly defined the new boundaries of the Creek Nation, which is what our jurisdiction is today. We're in the Cherokee Nation right now. You go over that bridge from the Creek Nation. But the Cherokee's under the same situation. The treaty established boundaries that they cannot change just by will of sovereignty. They have to stick with the treaty. But dealing with the enslavement issues, and we're, you know, this is a question that comes up a lot. Well, slavery wasn't that bad in Indian country with the tribes. It wasn't that bad of things. Let me tell you something. It was chattel slavery. The condition of the mother determined the condition of the child. The father could have been an Indian that raped the African woman. And because the African woman didn't have a clan or membership in the Creek tribal town, guess what happened to her kid? Though that kid is half-blood Indian. That kid was born into slavery. The other thing that's really important to understand the differences between slavery among the 5 tribes and slavery among the Confederate States is this. If you were a white plantation owner and you had a 10,000 acre plantation with 500 enslaved Africans, you not only owned the enslaved Africans, you owned the 10,000 acre plantation. That didn't happen in Indian territory because no individual owned land. So slavery in Indian territory, particularly with the Creeks, was important because the only value that the slaver had was the slave and not the land. And so to give up those enslaved people mean that they became penniless at the end of the Civil War. That's why they went to war, because a lot of the prominent Indians that enslaved people were instantly becoming poor like the rest of the Indians that didn't have enslaved Africans. And we talk about, well, not that many Indians own slaves in the tribe. Only 3% of white people in Mississippi own slaves, but all the rest of them went to fight for the institution of slavery in that state. And they had slave codes. A very small number of Creek Indians, including some of my family members, enslaved Black people. But the tribe itself passed slave codes that actually regulated slavery, that benefited the whole nation. So I applaud these heroes up here. Yeah, Damario, I remember when you got out of law school and started working immediately for the Creek Freedmen. This has been going on too long, too long. And every time a new chief is elected, strangely before they're elected, they don't have a problem with the Freedmen. And then they get elected and all of a sudden, oh, well, it's a sovereignty issue. There's nothing sovereign about the knee on the necks of freedmen. Your sovereign knee on the necks of freedmen. That's what it's all about. It's just cruel. That's what it is. It's just mean spirit and cruel. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with sovereignty. It's the will of a few people. The majority of Creek citizens like myself don't have a problem with Creek Freedmen. You'd be surprised how many people you meet out there who are surprised that the Creek Freedmen are not enrolled in the tribe. But then you got a very small, squeaky wheel of people who think it's the end of the world that Black people are part of an Indian tribe. And let's define Indian. It doesn't mean race. It means political status. That's all it is, the political status. There are white creeks, there are red creeks, there are mixed creeks, there's all kind of creeks. There are Muslim creeks, there are Christian creeks, there are traditional creeks. It's a political status. It's not a race of people. There's no such thing as a Cherokee race. It's a political status. It's like being a Democrat or Republican or a Californian or a Texan or Oklahoma. It's just a political status. There's nothing about a race of people called the Creeks. It's just a political status. If I choose not to be a Creek, I just go in and turn in my papers to renounce my citizenship. I'm no longer a Creek. You can't do that with a race, but you can do it with a political status. So the tribe has politically cleaned out its Black members of the tribe. And my suspicions is that a third of the Creek population today are people that have some African ancestry like myself. So when you have to enroll a whole nother class of people who are classified as freedmen on the rolls, which is very interesting, talking about a badge of slavery. I grew up in Mississippi, and I remember the Freedmen Bureau names on old buildings in Jackson, Mississippi, just outside of Jackson State. I remember those buildings. When was the last time you heard anybody in Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, any of those, Texas, those Confederate states, where Black people in those states are calling them Texas freedmen or Alabama freedmen? Nobody uses those antiquated words anymore. But the tribes have forced a group of people who descend from people that they once enslaved to wear a badge of slavery called freedmen, to identify them as your folks happen to be enslaved. And none of the southern states are even doing that today. The Bureau of Freedmen Affairs in the US government closed in the 1930s. But yet the 5 tribes are forcing these people. Oh, I know, yeah. I could go on, but anyway, y'all get the point.
One of my cousins. Well, listen, man, we appreciate everyone. Like I said, we have this event tonight at 6:30. Come back out, bring your friends, bring your relatives. It's gonna be a great time. We're gonna have some traditional Creek singing from one of our members. That's gonna be fantastic. And talk about what we're gonna do tomorrow in court, and hope everyone can make it down. So thank you so much, and we'll see you this evening. Thank you.